go? Where did those UKIP voters disappear to? We heard from Paul Nuttall there, standing down. It's no surprise, really, because for UKIP, it was a disastrous night. I want to show you this screen. It is absolutely fascinating. These are all the places in the United Kingdom where UKIP lost their deposit. You know what? There are so many, we can't even fit them all on our screen. UKIP fielded candidates in 377 constituencies. They lost their deposit in 336. So where did all those UKIP voters go? Well, it's clear that they didn't go to the Conservatives. Let's have a look at just how badly things went for them. If we have a look here at the targets that the Conservatives had in their sights. Now, before we went to the ballot box, all these were red. All these Conservative targets were red. And look, they pretty much still are all red. Theresa May really hoping to chip into some of these Labour strongholds, but it didn't work out. If we have a look at places like Chester, it only had a majority of 93. Up here at the top left, it only had a majority of 93, and yet the Tories weren't able to take it. Brentford and Isleworth, fascinating. The majority there was only 20. The majority now for Labour in that constituency, 12,182. Southampton, a Labour majority of only, there it is, Southampton, a Labour majority of only 100 in 2015. Now they've got a majority of 11,503. Now, if you have a look over the other side of the screen, we can have a look at the Labour targets. Now, again, Labour was hoping to really chip into Conservative constituencies, and they've had a huge amount of success, as you can see. This was all blue before we headed to the polling stations, and now so much of it is red. Look at this, Ipswich here, Ben Gummer's constituency. Ben Gummer helped write the Conservative manifesto, for goodness sake, but he is not the MP for Ipswich. That has gone to Labour as well. And just finally, to really put this into context, let me show you this. These seats before the election were all red, they were all Labour seats, and look at that. They pretty much still are. There's a smattering of blue here, a smattering of Conservative constituencies, but on the whole, they're all red. A fantastic night for Labour, all things considered.
Jonathan, thanks for talking us through the detail there. Well, let's talk about the campaigns overall, what issues won it and lost it for Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn. Well, no one actually won the election. I'm joined by Will Walden, former press secretary to Boris Johnson, now works at Edelman UK. Sonia Sodha, chief leader writer at The Observer, former senior policy advisor to Ed Miliband and Miranda Green, journalist for the FT and former press secretary to the former Lib Dem party leader Paddy Ashton. Now, I want to get a quick thought from you all, because so much is happening and I might have to jump away. Sonia, let's start with you. And Theresa May is digging in. Should she? Does she have the right to?
So I think probably what's going through her mind is there's a lot of uncertainty about today. I need to crack on with forming a government. But I think there are very, very serious questions to be asked about how long she can be in position for. I think what we saw last night was a massive challenge to what she went the country offering. She went to the country offering a hard Brexit and a very, very sharp programme of public spending cuts, very steep welfare cuts, very tough settlement for schools. And I think what happened last night, Labour's successes, really throws that into question. It's very hard to see how she can continue
Okay, because
to be
it was all
Prime Minister.
personalised, but I mean, still very much the biggest party. Will Walden, and it was Theresa May, and originally no mention of the Conservatives, then it became Theresa May and the Conservatives, but it was all about her.
Yeah, if you decide to run a presidential campaign, you need someone who looks presidential, and increasingly she got found out. The reality going forward was that they painted her as safe, strong, stable, but all around everything was changing. And I think where they've really suffered, I mean, yesterday evening, Tory High Command was thinking they were nowhere near this position. They were thinking they were 50, 60. Yep. This has come from absolutely nowhere. Three things. They underestimated young people voting. UKIP voters, Labour voters that went to UKIP in 2015 came back to Labour. They didn't go to the Tories. But I think most importantly, Tory Remainers either switched or stayed at home. If you combine all that with a core base that said, hang on a minute, you want to take away our winter fuel allowance and social care, and you've got a real problem. And in communicating that, I think the biggest single mistake that they made when they made the changes around social care was not to front up and just say, we're listening. Strong and stable leadership is about listening. We've heard what people are saying. We're going to put a cap in.
Okay.
Instead, she denied that, and voters looked at her and thought, hang on a minute, we're not fools.
You want to get Miranda's thoughts? I mean, if the Conservatives, and the ball is in their court with Theresa May, if they want to allow her to stay, there's nobody can prevent that.
Well, it's true, but it would look very eccentric, I think, because it's clear that she hasn't won her mandate for hard Brexit, and she hasn't won her mandate for a very extraordinary Tory manifesto, really, in the circumstances, which had dramatic changes. For example, the famous social care idea of getting older people to pay for their own care by using the wealth that's built up in their houses, which went down like a bucket of cold sick, as the Tories found on the doorstep. So I think I can see, as Sonia says, the psychology of thinking, well, let's play it steady for a day or so, perhaps. But I think it's a completely unsustainable situation, and it's a very difficult to read this result. What has the electorate instructed the politicians to do with an undecided vote and a hung parliament? But it's clear that they haven't given Theresa May the keys to number 10 or Jeremy Corbyn the keys to number 10. So it'd be very eccentric for either of them to decide to become Prime Minister without thinking that they didn't get an overwhelming endorsement.
I'm just aware the time might be limited, but we do have to reflect on Jeremy Corbyn, and as Will was touching on there, the mobilisation in particular of the youth vote, not just the registration, but actually getting them out to vote, and that's what the Conservatives thought might not happen, even if they're on the register, but this time they did. I mean, it was a remarkable campaign to see him grow during those 7 weeks and use all those rhetorical and oratorical skills he has.
I agree, and there are people pointing out today that he's lost, which on one level he has. He didn't win the election, but I think it would be incredibly churlish for anyone not to admit he has won on the level that his campaign far exceeded expectations. The share of the Labour vote has far exceeded expectations. It was his campaign, I think, as well as the Tory shortfalls, that denied Theresa May her majority. I think it was the Labour campaign that has really now thrown into question exactly what type of Brexit we go for.
We're going to
go on many levels.
You part that very nicely for me. Will, you're coming in next, but first of all, you know, the issue of Brexit, 11 days apparently until that first round of substantial negotiations takes place with the senior EU figures. Well, a lot of comment, a lot of thought about what happens now with the Brexit positioning. Indeed, some people are wondering whether those talks should go ahead. Tom Cheshire's been monitoring what people are saying minute by minute on social media at the moment. Thomas, give us some of the choice ones.
Yeah, well, so here we go on the EU. Started with speculation. Here's the journalist Stig Abel with a humorous one. Dear EU, you know how we took back control. Sadly, we appear to have lost it. Could you give us a bit of time and understanding? Love, UK. Well, Twitter is actually a forum for diplomacy these days. So you've got Michel Barnier, EU negotiator. He's saying Brexit negotiations should start when the UK is ready. Timetable and EU positions are clear. Let's put our minds together on striking a deal. Then we had Donald Tusk, the EU president. He said, we don't know when Brexit talks start. We know when they must end. That's in 2019, so the clock's ticking. Do your best to avoid a no deal as a result of no negotiations. And then finally, Guy Verhofstadt saying yet another own goal. After Cameron, now May will make already complex negotiations even more complicated. That's what they're saying. Democracy is rather a complicated thing, and it's going to get even more complicated as a result.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. Diplomacy in 140 characters. So Will Walden. Also coming in and just seeing from the German Foreign Ministry saying you're losing time. You know, the clock is ticking. 7 weeks went in the election campaign, and we don't have a clear negotiating position. But certainly as Theresa May's, we've kept being referred back to the Lancaster House speech, what was in the manifesto about leaving the single market and the customs union. Does that have to be modified?
I think there's a real difficulty here now around the terms of soft Brexit. It's not a helpful term. The reality that we face is that if you end freedom of movement, you have to leave the single market. Now, the people of this country, like it or not, voted to leave. So how the change will come about, I'm not sure. Whether they'll give ground on the idea of the final deal will be negotiated. What's happening in number 10 now is they're writing the speech. They want to get on with it. They want to say we can form a government, whether it's confidence and supply with the DUP, and the negotiations will start on time.
Nearly out of time, but so quick on that, Miranda. I mean, does it have to soften?
I think it does, and I think trying to say that the Brexit referendum result was a mandate for something really quite extreme in terms of the future of British business, British jobs and British prosperity does not stand anymore. We haven't seen Philip Hammond much in this campaign. He's been put in a cupboard, but he stood up at the Tory party conference and said the people did not vote to become poorer. And whoever ends up in charge of the Conservative Party in the next couple of days needs to remember that message, because this was an anti-austerity vote, in my view, and it was therefore definitely not a vote to leave the EU and become poorer at all
by
costs.
extension, I see where you're going. Listen, I know you've got plenty more people to talk to, plenty of things to write. Thank you all very much indeed. So much to absorb, and so much to absorb that will occur because we are expecting that door to open, maybe not for an hour.